Welcome to the San Antonio Spurs Roundtable, powered by Project Spurs. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia. And is it time for panic in the city of San Antonio? Well, the Spurs are down 1-2 to the Dallas Mavericks. And to talk about that and a lot more, I'm joined by Project Spurs' very own Steven Anderson and Chelsea Torres. Chelsea, we're going to have to blame you for this right now. What happened before the series started? You want to reverse the jinx right now?
I'll reverse it.
Okay, good. Well,
Mark Cuban, I take back what I said.
We're going to win it now. All right, so the Spurs, I guess, admit they are down 1-2 to the Dallas Mavericks in the opening round right now. They had a heartbreaking loss in Game 3 with the Vince Carter game-winning three-pointer, 108-109 Spurs lose. This series has been kind of weird. This is the #1 team, the powerhouse San Antonio Spurs, heading into the 8th-seeded team, which is the Dallas Mavericks, which many people thought gentleman's sweep at best. Now it looks like we've got a fight in our hands. What's happening?
Well, I mean, Spurs are underperforming, and it's simple as that, Jeff. I mean, you have the bench, who has been a staple of success for the Spurs all season long, and now they've seemed to have disappeared. Ginobili is from the Spurs bench, only one to really produce. Patty Mills, Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard up until Game 3. Marco Bellinelli, who we brought in specifically because he's a sharp shooter. He can hit threes. He's been known to hit clutch shots in the past when he was with Chicago. And now he seems to have disappeared and turned into another Roger Mason Jr.
Yeah,
so
you're right. Through 9 games, Marco Bellinelli, 14 points and about 55 minutes of play grand total. Patty Mills, he's averaging 4 points a game right now. This is unacceptable. This is not going to help the Spurs at least drive for that title #5.
I definitely agree. The bench has not performed, with the exception of Manu and a little bit of Kawhi. But I think other than that, the first 2 games was really scary because we were playing very sloppy. Spurs were playing very sloppy.
I think the Spurs are lucky to be at least getting one game right now.
They are very lucky. After yesterday's game, the Spurs and Dallas played a very similar game. The rebounds, assists, points, percentage, everything was about the same. The only thing that killed us, of course, was the Vince Carter 3. So I think we're going to be okay. It's just the Spurs are, they need to get back onto the fundamentals again. Watch out for those turnovers. Watch out, the Spurs need to work a little bit more on defense.
The Spurs are beating themselves up.
Yes.
The Game 2, 20-plus turnovers, not going to cut it. You're allowing Dallas to score over 100 points a game. The defenses almost have evaporated so far. Kawhi Leonard finally came to life. And then there's Danny Green, one of the starters who really has not shown up at all. 9 points, grand total, through 3 games versus Dallas. The big 3 plus Kawhi can't do this alone.
they can't. And, if it's going to be like this throughout the next couple of games, and I don't see the Spurs winning the series. The bench has to step it up. And it doesn't matter what team you're really talking about, because if your stars are doing most of the work, that team is not going to win. So you apply that to the Spurs. The Spurs need their bench, their main bench, and Danny Green is a staple of that.
Right. This Spurs team is looking like the 8th seed right now. Dallas is dictating the tempo. Rick Carlisle, Mavs coach, he is actually out coaching Pop right now, doing the necessary adjustments. Pop has some blame in this as well.
I think Pop has a little bit of a blame, but if anything, the Spurs are the ones to blame themselves. Manu has been doing great. Timmy and Tony have been doing pretty good. But again, the bench need to step up. It's the Spurs themselves. I do think that Pop, he needs to maybe work around, especially when the pick and rolls, doing the under. We weren't defending that very well. That's why Ellis was able to get on the outside and shoot those threes so many times, and we were not able to defend that as well as we could have.
You also see Patty Mills, when Dallas sets a screen, Patty Mills goes under the screen, and that leaves Ellis or Jose Calderon wide open. And to get back to Pop, Jeff, the Spurs are to blame, but in order to win games, the coach has to make adjustments. And it seems to me Pop really hasn't made those adjustments. What he needs to do is, I think, what Dallas is doing to Tony, which is putting their bigs on him, Samuel Dalembert, Dirk Nowitzki at times. Sean Marion has been on him. So if Pop would do that to their guards, Monta Ellis or Jose Calderon, who we both know, or all of us know, he's gone off in those games. All 3 games, those 2 have gone off on the Spurs. Put some pressure on those 2 guards. Let Dirk get his shots, but Dirk cannot beat you alone. So something needs to give.
Is it time to maybe shuffle up that starting lineup? I mean, Danny Green, he's not been producing whatsoever in this series. But if you pull like a Manu Ginobili off the bench, you're going to weaken that bench.
You are, and Pop has already said he's not going to change that starting lineup for Game 4. He's already has said that, so the starting lineup will remain the same. But some changes do need to be made, and I pray that the bench really steps up.
Oh, and well, you know, you can talk about the bench all you want. You can talk about game planning. I think it's just more mental with this team. They don't look the same. After Game 2, I believe, I was in the locker room with the Dallas Mavericks. I spoke with Jose Calderon. He just told me flat out, they look confused out there.
It doesn't look like the Spurs.
They look confused out there.
It doesn't look like what we saw in the regular season. The Spurs, again, they're not playing the fundamental basketball that they're used to playing, that everybody knows about them. And not only that, but the Spurs are they've just been playing sloppy, and they don't look like they have that confidence as they once had. The playoffs are a completely different series. You know, it's more intense, and they're just, I don't think they've hit that basketball rhythm yet, or not the basketball, the playoff rhythm.
So maybe they did peak too soon in the regular season? Are they coming out? Look at Tony Parker, who looked phenomenal in the first half, and Game 3, 2 points in the second half.
Tony looks like he's mentally checked out of this series. You know, apart from Game 1, he hasn't really been there, as you said. You know, some people have speculated, you know, maybe Tony wants to get the series over with, go back to play for France. He has a baby on the way. But I don't think so. I think mentally he's not there. And apart from, I said, Manu and Timmy, the bench hasn't shown it. It is a mental thing. Marco Bellinelli, we keep touching on it, and Danny Green and a little bit of Kawhi, it's all mental. If they can really just get their heads wrapped around what they can do, this Spurs team can easily win the next couple of games and win this series.
Well, I mean, I hope you're right, but, you know, the feeling, the atmosphere in San Antonio is a little bit of panic is setting in right now among fans. Is it time to panic?
Honestly, I'm a little worried, and I think only because last night's game was something we haven't seen the past, you know, the first 2 games. Game 3 was great because, again, we played the same game as Dallas. But I personally think that Dallas is peaking at the right time. They didn't have this, you know, they weren't playing this way during the regular season, and they're playing great now. But then again, the Spurs would not have won, or they would have won if Vince Carter didn't hit that 3. And that's just one of those luck of the draws that happen.
I disagree. I love you, but I disagree. Because, I mean, you know, Dallas to me isn't really peaking at the right time. It's what the Spurs aren't doing.
So you're saying Dallas, it's the Spurs that are losing this series, not that Dallas is doing?
Correct. It's the Spurs that are losing this series because Dallas is not as good as they're looking right now.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a combination of both. I think it's what Dallas is doing and the Spurs mentality right now.
It's maybe, but to me it's more on the Spurs than Dallas, in my opinion, because what the Spurs aren't doing is to Dallas's advantage. When have the Spurs ever turned it over 24 times in the playoffs? It's very rare. And in Game 3, they turned it over 14 times. 8 of those 14 were in the third quarter.
Well, I think I think some panic needs to be setting in right now.
Not to me.
For some reason, San Antonio comes back and takes the series and advances. If they're playing like this, they're not going to be able to get away with that with either Houston or Portland. 2 teams that have pretty much dominated the Spurs this regular season and given Spurs fits a lot. So, you know, I just don't see it. They need to make a 180. They need to really have a gut check right now.
You know, I mean, like Chelsea said, you know, without Vince Carter's miracle shot, the Spurs would have won that game.
But they shouldn't have been in that position to begin with.
They shouldn't have, but that was their best game that they played all series. Game 2, they were what Spurs team was that? You know, Game 1, if it wasn't for Tim Duncan, they would have lost. They should be down 3-0. They're lucky right now. They're down 2-1.
All right. Well, those are our thoughts right there on the Spurs series heading into Game 4, which will be in Dallas. So make sure to go out to news4sa.com and, of course, projectspurs.com. Give us your thoughts on the series. But before we close, kind of what overshadowed the NBA's playoff yesterday, and pretty much I think throughout the entire playoffs now, was Donald Sterling, the owner of the Clippers. He was recorded making racial comments against African Americans and has created a firestorm. I mean, it's to the point where even people like Magic Johnson are saying they're never going to go to another Clippers game going for as long as he's the owner. What should the NBA do?
Honestly, I'm not sure. It's David Sterling. He owns the Clippers.
Donald Sterling.
Sorry. And at first I was thinking that this whole thing that had happened was just out of anger of his wife, was it, or girlfriend? And so that's why I was just kind of like, oh, you know, he's not racist, it's not a big deal.
Well,
but it keeps, you know...
He has a history of
exactly,
this, yes.
And this keeps coming out, and after David Stern apparently has turned his shoulder on it, it kind of makes you wonder, you know, is he racist, and if so, what should we do about it? What is there to do?
Right, Adam Silver did comment on this.
He did, and, you know, he's already...
the new NBA commissioner.
Yes, and he has said that, you know, we're going to look into it, but as of right now, we really can't comment on what we're going to do. But one thing I found interesting is that Peter Holt, a Spurs owner, he came out and said this wouldn't be the first time that he's said some of these comments. So Chelsea's right. It does make you wonder what else has he said and what else is he hiding. And
Right.
I think it's going to come out eventually.
Right. Well, we'll see exactly what he said. We'll see what happens to Donald Sterling and the Clippers, but it'll be interesting. Hopefully, it doesn't overshadow too much of the postseason. But for Chelsea Torres and Steven Anderson, I am Jeff Garcia. Make sure to go out to ProjectSpurs.com for all your postseason coverage.
Everybody dance.
We're going to dance now.